He just wanted to take a cool selfie, but within seconds he was sprawled in a filthy puddle, soaked, humiliated, and stunned. The crowd roared with laughter. Phones were already recording, and the guardsman, without even blinking, towered over him like the embodiment of royal justice. Brian tried to protest, to get up, but the response was cold and merciless. "Move away or you will be escorted by the police." But this was only the beginning of his worst day. What happened next would make him an internet laughingstock. "This channel won't survive without your subscription and likes. Help me." London was gray and chilly that day when Brian Miller, a 32-year-old American tourist, stepped onto the cobblestone sidewalks near Buckingham Palace. Tall and lanky, with short blonde hair, he was dressed in the classic tourist uniform. A hoodie emblazoned with "London Baby," worn-out jeans, and chunky white sneakers. In his hands, he clutched a brand-new iPhone, purchased specifically for this trip. Brian dreamed of taking a viral photo. His social media was already filled with snapshots of Big Ben, selfies with red telephone booths, and even a cringe-worthy video of him attempting a British accent. But he needed more, something that would explode with likes and comments from his followers. And then he saw her. A towering, powerful guard horse with a gleaming black mane stood motionless, like a statue carved from stone. Mounted on her back was a royal guardsman, clad in the traditional red uniform and a tall bearskin hat. He was perfectly still, his face hidden in the shadow of his headgear. The horse, trained to stand for hours without moving, blinked slowly. "Perfect," Brian muttered. He switched to his front-facing camera and, without thinking, stepped toward the horse. The crowd of tourists watched him with interest, but the moment he reached out and grabbed the horse's mane, something happened that he clearly did not expect. The horse remained seemingly indifferent until Brian's fingers gripped its thick black mane. The second he tugged at the strands, trying to pull its head closer for the perfect selfie, an irritated snort filled the air. The horse jerked its head up, muscles tensing, its powerful nostrils flaring as it released a warm puff of breath into the chilly London air. Brian felt the thick, coarse strands slipping from his grasp, but he grinned and reached again, completely unaware of just how dangerous his actions were. Then, the air was split by a sharp, thunderous voice. "Stand back from the horse!" It was like a bolt of lightning had struck the square. Brian froze. The sheer force of the guard's voice seemed to slice through the air, making his heart skip a beat. The entire palace courtyard fell into an eerie silence. Even the tourists, chatting and clicking their cameras, went still. The guardsman hadn't moved. His figure, framed by the heavy red uniform, still towered over the crowd. But now, he no longer looked like a lifeless statue. His entire stance was coiled with tension, like a drawn bowstring. His face was hidden beneath the tall fur hat, but his voice carried an iron command. And yet, Brian made the biggest mistake of his life. Instead of stepping back, like any reasonable person would, he burst out laughing. "Hey man, relax! It's just a photo!" He scoffed, waving dismissively. The crowd gasped. Some tourists instinctively took a step back, sensing that something incredible was about to happen. Those with phones in hand immediately hit record. They already knew. This was a moment they couldn't miss. The horse, still flicking its ears in agitation, stomped a heavy hoof against the stone. Its massive frame shifted forward slightly. It could feel the tension radiating from its rider. And then, something truly spectacular happened. The guardsman, who just moments ago seemed like an immovable figure, suddenly sprang into motion with military precision. He dismounted in a flash, so fast that even the wind didn't have time to ruffle his coat. His polished boots struck the cobblestone with a forceful thud, the sound echoing like a hammer against metal. The crowd held its breath. Brian instinctively stepped back, suddenly realizing that the man before him was not a street performer or a decorative prop for tourist photos. He was a highly trained military professional. The guardsman lifted his head. His face remained unreadable, but in the shadow of the tall bearskin hat, the sharp line of his jaw was visible, tense, unyielding. "Do not touch the horse!" His voice cracked through the air like a whip. A shiver ran down Brian's spine. The crowd waited, and then came the moment, the one the entire internet would remember forever. Brian didn't even have time to process what had happened. A sudden yank, his legs buckled, the world tilted sharply, and then, splash! He crashed backward into a filthy puddle. Ice-cold water soaked his hoodie instantly. Muddy streaks dripped down his face and into his mouth. The hard impact against the wet stone knocked the wind out of his lungs. The crowd erupted. A stunned moment of silence was shattered by an explosion of laughter, gasps, and the frantic clicking of phone cameras. "Do not touch the horse!" The guardsman repeated the command, his voice even sterner than before, a final warning. The irony was crystal clear. The American who had desperately wanted an epic selfie had become the spectacle himself. Brian blinked, trying to comprehend what just happened. His glasses were askew, one lens cracked. His phone, once clutched in his hand, now lay in the muddy water beside him. Wet hair stuck to his forehead, droplets of grime dripped from his nose. The crowd gave him no mercy. "Dude, did you see that fall? Oh my God, this is going straight to TikTok. Bro, British guards don't mess around. Ha 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 ha." Laughter rippled through the square, every new comment hitting Brian's pride like a slap in the face. At first, he just sat there, dazed, eyes unfocused. Then his lips started trembling. Humiliation churned into anger. "You can't do this to me. I have rights," he screeched, trying to scramble to his feet. But his voice no longer carried confidence. It was the desperate, shrill cry of a man whose dignity had just been obliterated in front of dozens of onlookers and countless phone cameras. The guardsman didn't even blink. "Move away or you will be escorted by the police." His tone was flat, emotionless, like he was addressing just another rule breaker, not someone worth any real attention. The crowd loved it. "Police? Oh, this just keeps getting better. Dude, you might want to leave before they drag you out." Brian clenched his fists, but quickly realized he had lost. Any attempt to argue would only dig him deeper into the pit of embarrassment. His entire bold American act had shattered. He had officially become the joke of the day. And the worst part? This moment was already spreading across the internet. Brian's fall lasted less than a second. Mud splashing, a startled yelp, his body smacking against the wet pavement. It all happened so fast that he barely registered the depth of his humiliation. But the internet did, and it worked fast. Within 45 minutes, the first TikTok video appeared. A short clip, filmed from multiple angles, immediately caught fire. By the end of the hour, it was trending. Thousands of comments, endless shares, and an avalanche of laughing emojis. The headlines were brutal. "American tourist grabs royal horse. Guardsman makes sure he grabs the ground instead. How not to behave in Britain. A one-video guide. Tourist versus guardsman. Guardsman, 1. Tourist, 0. The comments poured in. "Absolutely deserved. That's the Queen's Guard, not a circus act." "OMG, his scream is the funniest thing I've heard all day." "They should sell tickets for this. London's newest attraction, dumb tourists getting wrecked." "This guy just earned a free trip home and a lifetime of secondhand embarrassment." And it didn't stop there. The video spread beyond the UK. Americans had plenty to say too. Typical American tourist, no respect, no awareness. "Please, can we just leave him there? Don't let him come back to the States. This should be in textbooks under International Shame 101. Brian, soaking wet, humiliated but still desperately clinging to his ego, made the worst possible mistake. He tried to defend himself online. Post number 1 on Instagram. People, you're all misunderstanding. It was just a miscommunication. Nobody said you couldn't touch the horse. 48,000 dislikes, 6,000 comments. Bro, not only did they say it, they screamed it at you. Miscommunication? A miscommunication is forgetting your umbrella in London, not getting slammed in front of a crowd. You're embarrassing us more than bad acting in British TV dramas. Post number 2 on Twitter. X. I didn't do anything wrong. The horse was fine. The guard overreacted. 63,000 dislikes, 9,000 comments. Oh, buddy, if the guard really overreacted, you'd be flying home on a stretcher. Your ability to read the room, 0-10. You've officially become Britain's favorite person to hate. Even his own friends started unfollowing him. Comments under his old travel photos. We used to think you were just weird. Now we know you're just a disgrace. Brian, for real, just log off. Your vacation has officially turned into the worst side quest of the year. With every passing hour, more people recognized his face. He couldn't even step outside his hotel without risking a group of teenagers quoting his infamous scream at him. And that's when he realized staying in London was impossible. The next morning, Brian stood in line at Heathrow Airport's passport control. When it was his turn, the officer, an older man with an amused smirk, glanced at his passport, then up at his face. You wouldn't happen to be that guy from the video, would you? Brian clenched his teeth. No. The officer chuckled and stamped his passport. Well, either way, have a safe flight, sir. As the plane lifted off the runway, Brian buried his face in his hands. His trip to London was supposed to be an adventure. It had become a meme.